The gunshot cracked through the night air like thunder, and Sheriff Cassian Vale kicked down the saloon door just as rough hands shoved Lirelei toward the stage. Her wrists were bound, her emerald dress torn at the shoulder, but her eyes blazed with defiance that could set the whole damn town on fire. $50 for this wild filly, bellowed Graven Maddox, the town's most notorious flesh peddler, his gold teeth glinting in the lamplight. She's got spirit that needs breaking. Cassian's Colt .45 was in his hand before his boot hit the sawdust floor. The only thing getting broken tonight is your nose, Maddox. The crowd of drunken cowboys and traveling merchants fell silent. Cards frozen mid-deal, whiskey glasses suspended halfway to lips. Lirelei's gaze locked with Cassian's across the smoky room, and something electric passed between them. Recognition, perhaps, or destiny wearing the mask of coincidence. Sheriff Vale, Maddox sneered, his scarred face twisting into an ugly grin. This ain't your concern. Girl's got debts to pay, and I'm collecting. Like hell you are. Cassian stepped forward, his spurs jangling a death knell on the wooden planks. Turn her loose. Maddox's hand drifted toward his holster. You're outnumbered, lawman. Got 6 men here who'll put you in the ground for the right price? Then they better start digging. Cassian's voice was steady as winter stone, but his heart hammered against his ribs as he watched Lirelei struggle against her bonds. She was magnificent, fierce, and untamed like a mustang that had never known bridle or bit. The standoff stretched, taut as a bowstring. In the amber glow of oil lamps, dust motes danced like ghosts, and somewhere a piano played a mournful tune that spoke of lost love and broken dreams. Cassian had seen enough violence to last 3 lifetimes, but tonight felt different. Tonight, everything hung in the balance. You don't know what you're interfering with? Maddox hissed. This little wildcat killed a man in Denver. Self-defense, she claims, but dead is dead. Lirelei's chin lifted higher. He had it coming, and I'd do it again. The words hit Cassian like lightning. This wasn't just about saving a woman from a terrible fate. This was about saving someone who reminded him of everything he'd lost. Everything he'd sworn to protect when he pinned on the badge after his brother's murder. Last warning, Maddox. Cassian's thumb caressed the hammer of his Colt. Let her go, or I start shooting. The flesh peddler's eyes darted to his men, calculating odds, weighing profit against survival. Behind him, Lirelei twisted her wrists, working at the rough rope with desperate fingers. Blood seeped from where the hemp cut into her skin, but she never made a sound. That's when Cassian knew he was already lost to her. The first shot came from the shadows behind the bar.
Get.
And Cassian dove sideways, pulling Lirelei down with him as splinters exploded from the wooden post where his head had been. His body covered hers. And he caught the scent of jasmine and gunpowder in her hair, a contradiction that made his pulse race faster than the bullets whistling overhead. Can you ride? Right? He whispered against her ear, sawing at her bonds with his boot knife. Better than I can shoot tied up, she gasped back, her breath warm against his neck. The ropes fell away, and she rubbed circulation back into her wrists, while Cassian returned fire at Maddox's men. The saloon erupted into chaos, overturned tables, screaming women, and the crash of breaking glass as bullets shattered the mirror behind the bar. Back door, Cassian growled, reloading with practiced speed. My horse is tied behind the general store. They moved together like dancers who'd rehearsed the steps 100 times, ducking and weaving through the maze of furniture while lead flew around them. Lirelei snatched a fallen cowboy's gun and put 2 shots into the ceiling, sending more. Men diving for cover? You're full of surprises, Cassian muttered, impressed despite the circumstances. You don't know the half of it, Sheriff. They burst through the rear exit into the cool night air, and Cassian's stallion Thunder whinnied softly at their approach. The black horse was 17 hands of pure muscle and speed, exactly what they needed to outrun Maddox's posse. Can you manage bareback? Cassian asked, swinging up behind the saddle. I grew up on Cherokee land before she stopped herself, old wounds flickering across her face. Yes, I can manage. He pulled her up behind him, her arms circling his waist, and Thunder exploded into motion. They thundered down the main street of Willowbrook, past the church and the schoolhouse, past the homes of decent folk who'd peek through their curtains and whisper about the wild sheriff and the woman he'd rescued. Behind them, shouts erupted. From the saloon, as Maddox organized pursuit, Cassian could hear hoofbeats gaining, could feel Liralay's heart beating against his back like a caged bird.
There's a lion.
Shack up in Devil's Canyon, he called over the wind. We can hole up there. Till morning, they'll follow us. Let them try. They rode hard through the night, following deer trails and creek beds that only someone who'd grown up in this country would know. Liralay's thighs gripped Thunder's flanks like she'd been born to the saddle, and her hands on Cassian's belt were steady as bedrock. The moon rose full and silver, casting everything in ethereal light, the sagebrush, the distant mountains. The woman whose life he'd just turned upside down to save. When they finally reached the abandoned cabin, Cassian's shirt was soaked with sweat, and his arms ached from gripping the reins. We should be safe here, he said, sliding down and helping her dismounts. In the moonlight, Liralay looked like something from a fever dream, her dark hair wild from the ride, her dress torn but her spirit unbroken. She studied the cabin then, turned to face him with eyes that held depths he was only beginning to fathom. Why? She asked simply. Oh, why risk everything for a stranger? Cassian unsaddled Thunder, buying time to find words for something he didn't fully understand himself. Maybe because you're not as much of a stranger as you think. Inside the line shack, moonlight streamed through gaps in the chinked walls, painting silver stripes across the rough-hewn floor. Cassian built a small fire in the stone hearth, while Liralay explored their temporary sanctuary, a single room with a narrow bunk, a table made from split logs, and shelves that held the basic supplies left by previous visitors. You still haven't answered my question, she said, settling on a wooden crate across from where he knelt, feeding kindling to the flames. The firelight danced across her face, highlighting the determined set of her jaw and the way her eyes seemed to hold secrets deeper than canyon shadows. Cassian had been a lawman for 8 years, had learned to read people like wanted posters. But Liralay remained beautifully, frustratingly unreadable. My brother Matthias was murdered 3 years ago, he said finally, not looking at her. Shot down in cold blood by men who thought they were above the law. I couldn't save him. You think saving me somehow makes up for that? Maybe. Sat back on his heels, meeting her gaze. Or maybe I just couldn't watch another person get destroyed by scum like Maddox. Liralay was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tracing the rough fabric of her torn dress. The man I killed in Denver, she said softly. His name was Cornelius Blackthorne. He owned half the city and thought that gave him the right to own me too. Cassian's jaw tightened. What happened? I was working as a seamstress in his wife's dress shop. Cornered me one night after closing, said he'd been watching me, wanted to make me his arrangement. Voice grew cold as winter steel. When I refused, he tried to take what he wanted anyway, so I put my sewing scissors through his heart. Good, Cassian said, and meant it. She looked up, surprised by the vehemence in his voice. The law didn't see it that way. His family put a bounty on my head, dead or alive. I've been running ever since. How long? 6 months. Long enough to learn that there aren't many places a woman can hide when powerful men want her found. Laughed bitterly. Willowbrook was supposed to be my fresh start. New name, new life. Then Maddox recognized me from the wanted posters. Outside, an owl called through the darkness, its voice lonely and haunting. Cassian added another log too. The fire watching sparks spiral up the chimney, like prayers ascending to heaven. What's your real name? He asked. Does it matter? I've been so many people these past months. Sometimes I forget who I was before. It matters to me. She studied his face in the flickering light, searching for something trust, perhaps, or the promise of safety she'd been denied. For so long, Violetta, she whispered. Violetta Nightingale. Beautiful name for a beautiful woman. Color rose in her cheeks. Flattery won't change what I am, Sheriff. I'm a killer and a fugitive. Associating with me will destroy your reputation. Maybe your life. Cassian stood and crossed to where she sat, kneeling before her crate like a knight before his queen. My reputation's already shot to hell. Half the town thinks I'm too soft. The other half thinks I'm too hard. As for my life, he reached out, gently touching her cheek. Maybe it's time I started actually living it. Breath caught as his thumb traced the line of her cheekbone. Cassian. I've been dead inside since Matthias died, he continued, his voice rough with emotion, going through the motions, keeping the peace but not really living. Then I saw you tonight. I saw the fire in your eyes, and something woke up inside me that I thought was buried forever. Thunder's warning whinny shattered the intimate moment. Both Cassian and Violetta were on their feet instantly, hands moving to weapons with the fluid grace of those who'd learned survival the hard way. Through the gaps in the walls, the steady drum of approaching hoofbeats grew louder. How many? Violetta whispered, checking the cylinder of the gun she'd taken from the saloon. Cassian peered through a crack in the door, counting the shadowy riders outlined against the star-scattered sky. 8, maybe 10. Maddox brought friends. The bounty on my head must be higher than I thought, or he's got other reasons for wanting you back. Cassian's voice carried a dangerous edge as he considered the implications. Either way, they picked the wrong night to corner us. The riders spread out in a semicircle around the cabin, their intentions clear. No negotiation, no surrender, just overwhelming force designed to end the chase permanently. Maddox's voice carried across the clearing, thick with whiskey and malice. Sheriff Vale, you've got 10 seconds to send out the girl, or we burn that shack down around you. Cassian called back without hesitation. Come and take her. The first volley of gunfire erupted immediately, bullets slamming into the log walls like angry hornets. Violetta dove behind the overturned table, while Cassian flattened himself against the wall beside a window, returning fire with methodical precision. Can't keep this up forever, Violetta said during a brief lull. They've got us outgunned and surrounded, maybe. Cassian ejected spent shells and reloaded with practiced speed. But they're city boys playing at being tough. This is my country, he was right. The attackers had made the classic mistake of assuming superior numbers guaranteed victory. But they'd forgotten that desperate people fight harder, and that local knowledge was worth more than extra ammunition. Cassian knew every stone, every tree, every shadow within a mile of the cabin. There's a root cellar, he said, nodding toward a trapdoor partially hidden beneath a moth-eaten rug. Tunnel leads to a wash about 50 yards north. If we can reach it, what about Thunder? He's smart enough to find his way home. Cassian's expression grew grim. Question is, can we make it to the tunnel before they rush the cabin? Another fusillade of shots answered him, this time accompanied by the acrid smell of smoke. Maddox's men were lighting torches, preparing to make good on their threat to burn them out. Now or never, Violetta said, her face set with determination that made Cassian's heart swell with something dangerously close to love. They moved together with desperate efficiency, Cassian providing covering fire while Violetta wrestled the heavy trapdoor open. The tunnel yawned black and uninviting, carved from earth and shored up with rotting timbers that spoke of long-ago miners and forgotten dreams. Ladies first, Cassian said with a grin that didn't quite hide his fear. Such a gentleman, she replied. But her eyes were soft with something that might have been affection. The tunnel was a nightmare of spider webs and damp earth, barely wide enough for one person to crawl through. Behind them, the sound of splintering wood announced that Maddox's patience had finally run out. Shouts and curses echoed through the cabin as the attackers discovered their quarry had vanished. Violetta reached the end of the tunnel first, aside a wooden grate concealed by brush and tumbleweeds. The wash was deeper than Cassian had remembered. Carved by flash floods into a natural trench that offered both concealment and a route deeper into the Badlands. Which way? She whispered. As he emerged beside her, Cassian oriented himself by the North Star, visible through the narrow slice of sky above their heads. Follow the wash east for 2 miles. Then up the game trail toward Widow's Peak. There's another cabin there, but this one's got friends. They began moving immediately, keeping to the sandy bottom of the wash where their footprints would be harder to follow. Behind them, orange light flickered against the canyon walls as the line shack caught fire. And angry voices carried on the night wind. The abandoned mining camp at Widow's Peak looked like the skeleton of some great beast. It's wooden, buildings bleached white by sun and scoured by wind. But as Cassian and Violetta approached through the pre-dawn darkness, warm light glowed in the windows of the largest structure, and the smell of bacon and coffee promised sanctuary. Jeremiah Crow, Cassian explained as they picked their way. Between rusted mining equipment and collapsed sheds, old-timer who worked these claims for 30 years before the silver played out. He's got no love for bounty hunters or men who trade in human flesh. The door opened before they could knock, revealing a weathered man with silver hair and eyes like chips of flint. Despite his aged appearance, the rifle in his hands was steady as stone. Cassian Vale, Jeremiah said, his voice carrying the rasp of a man who'd breathed too much rock dust. Figured you'd show up eventually. Saw the fire down at Devil's Canyon. Need help, Jeremiah, says Violetta, and she's in more trouble than she deserves. The old miner's gaze shifted to take in Violetta's torn dress and defiant posture, and something in his expression softened. Trouble's got a way of finding the innocent. Come in, both of you. Coffee's hot and breakfast is cooking. Inside, the cabin was spartanly furnished, but scrupulously clean. Jeremiah's wife, Winifred, emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a flour sack apron. She was a small woman with kind eyes and gray hair pinned back in a practical bun. Mercy, she clucked, taking in Violetta's appearance. You look like you've been through a war, child. Jeremiah, put that rifle away and help me get some decent clothes for this poor girl. Within an hour, Violetta had been transformed. Winifred's spare dress was simple brown wool, but it fit reasonably well and was whole. Her hair had been brushed and braided, and the haunted look in her eyes had begun to fade under the gentle ministrations of the older woman.
Alvin,
Jeremiah said once they were all seated around his rough-hewn table. Tell me what's got Graven Maddox so stirred up, that he's willing to burn down half the territory. Cassian outlined the events at the saloon, carefully omitting any details about Violetta's past that weren't directly relevant. Jeremiah listened without interruption, occasionally nodding or grunting his understanding. Maddox has been getting bolder lately, the old miner said, when Cassian finished. Word is, he's got backing from someone with deep pockets and deeper connections. Someone who wants to expand the flesh trade beyond the usual routes. Any idea who? Cassian asked. Rumors point to Judge Aldrich Pemberton, up in Capital City. Man's got a reputation for unsavory appetites and the money to indulge them. Violetta's face went pale. Pemberton, he was at Blackthorn's funeral, spoke about what a great loss. His death was to the community. The pieces clicked together in Cassian's mind like the chambers of a well-oiled revolver. Pemberton probably has financial interests in Blackthorn's businesses. With him dead, those investments are at risk. But if he can discredit the woman who killed him, he protects his money and gets revenge at the same time, Violetta finished. Why? Plus a new acquisition for his private collection. Found Violetta's across the table, you poor dear. Men like that think they can buy and sell people like livestock. The question is, Jeremiah said grimly, what do we do about it? Can't fight a corrupt judge with bullets alone. Cassian leaned back in his chair, his mind racing through possibilities. Outside, the sun was rising over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold. It was going to be a beautiful day, assuming they lived to see the end of it. Maybe. We can't fight him with bullets, he said slowly, but there might be another way. Pemberton's powerful, but he's also paranoid. Men like him always have enemies, people they've wronged or cheated. If we can find the right leverage, you're talking about blackmail, Violetta said. I'm talking about justice served cold instead of hot. Cassian's smile was sharp as a blade. Sometimes the pen really is mightier than the sword. The plan they hatched over Winifred's flapjacks and strong coffee was audacious, dangerous, and probably insane. It was also their only chance of ending Pemberton's pursuit permanently without spending the rest of their lives looking over their shoulders. Telegraph office first, Cassian said, studying the rough map Jeremiah had sketched on brown paper. I've got contacts in Capital City, other lawmen who've had run-ins with Pemberton. If anyone has dirt on him, it'll be Sheriff Marcus Ironwood. And if he doesn't? Violetta asked. Then we improvise. Cassian's grin was equal parts confidence and desperation. Oh, I've gotten pretty good at that lately. The ride to Copper Creek took most of the morning, following game trails and abandoned mining roads that kept them well away from the main routes where Maddox's men might be searching. Thunder had indeed found his way to Jeremiah's stable during the night, along with a sweet-tempered mare named Rosebud that Winifred insisted Violetta borrow. The telegraph office in Copper Creek was a single room attached to the general store, presided over by a nervous man named Perkins who jumped every time the key clicked. Cashin's message to Capital City was brief and coded. Using the law enforcement network that connected every sheriff's office from the Mexican border to Canada, need background on Judge AP, stop, urgent, stop Cassian, reply came within 2 hours, crackling over the wire in short bursts that Perkins transcribed with shaking hands. When Cassian read the message, his expression grew grim. "What is it?" Violetta asked. "Ironwood says Pemberton's cleaner than a Sunday shirt on the surface, but there are rumors. Missing persons, unexplained wealth, connections to the territorial governor that go deeper than political friendship. That's not enough to stop him. No, but this might be." Cassian showed her the second part of the message. "Pemberton's got a weakness, his nephew Clayton. The boy's gotten into trouble with gambling debts and worse. Word is the judge has been covering for him, using his influence to make problems disappear." Violetta studied the telegram, her mind working through the implications. "You think we can use the nephew against him?" "I think we can make Pemberton believe we have evidence that could destroy his family name. Men like him care more about reputation than money, more about legacy than life." He spent the rest of the day in preparation, crafting a careful web of half-truths and implications that would make even a paranoid judge believe his darkest secrets had been exposed. Cashin's years of law enforcement had taught him how to read people, how to find the pressure points that could make even the most powerful man crumble. As evening approached, they made their way to the Copper Creek Hotel, a modest establishment that catered to traveling merchants and mining engineers. The desk clerk, a thin man with spectacles and ink-stained fingers, looked nervous when Cassian showed his badge. "We need to send a message to Capital City," Cassian said. "Private courier, fastest horse you can find." The message they composed was a masterpiece of veiled threats and calculated intimidation. Without actually claiming to possess any evidence, it strongly implied that certain documents had come to light regarding Judge Pemberton's financial arrangements and his nephew's criminal activities. The price for discretion was simple: call off the bounty on Violetta Nightingale. Cease any involvement in Graven Maddox's operations. Think it'll work? Violetta asked as they watched the courier ride north through the gathering dusk. "If it doesn't, we'll be dead by this time tomorrow." Cashin's honesty was brutal, but necessary. Pemberton's not the type to ignore threats, even implied ones. He'll either back down or escalate. And escalation means sending every gun for hire. Between here and Mexico, they took a room under false names, keeping their weapons close and their ears open for the sound of approaching horses. Violetta sat by the window watching the street below, while Cassian cleaned and loaded their guns with methodical precision. "Whatever happens," she said softly, "I want you to know that today was the first time in months I felt like I could breathe again." Cassian looked up from his Colt, meeting her eyes in the lamplight. "This isn't over yet. Maybe not. Even if it ends badly, at least it ends with us together." The reply came at dawn, delivered by a different courier whose horse was lathered with sweat and whose eyes held the desperate urgency of a man who'd ridden through the night. The message was brief, written on expensive stationery that bore the official seal of the territorial court. Matter resolved. Bounty canceled. Operations terminated. Incident closed. AP. Cassian read it twice before allowing himself to believe it, then showed it to Violetta, who took it with hands that trembled only slightly. Outside their window, Copper Creek was waking up shopkeepers opening their doors, children playing. In the dusty street, life continuing in its eternal rhythm. "Is it really over?" she whispered. "As far as the law is concerned, you're a free woman. Pemberton won't risk exposure, and without his backing, Maddox is just another small-time criminal." Cassian tucked the telegram into his vest pocket. Of course, there's still the matter of what happens next. They faced each other in the morning light streaming through the hotel window. Two people who'd found each other in the darkest of circumstances and discovered something worth fighting for. Violetta had shed the haunted look that had shadowed her eyes, replaced by something that might have been hope. I don't even know what normal feels like anymore, she admitted. I've been running, hiding, afraid to stay in one place. Long enough to put down roots? Maybe it's time to learn. Cassian moved to stand beside her at the window, close enough that he could smell the faint scent of jasmine in her hair. Question is, where do you want to learn it? Below them, a young couple walked hand in hand toward the church at the end of the street, their faces bright with the joy of two people building a life together. Children chased a dog through the dust, while their mothers called them in for breakfast. And somewhere, a blacksmith's hammer rang against his anvil in steady, dependable rhythm. This is nice, Violetta said, nodding toward the peaceful scene. But I was thinking somewhere with fewer memories, somewhere we could start fresh. She turned to face him fully, and in her eyes he saw everything he'd never dared hope for: love, trust, and the promise of a future that neither of them would have to face alone. I'm hoping you might want to hand in that badge and try something new. There's good land opening up in Oregon Territory, they say. Room for a man to raise cattle, maybe start a family. Cassian's answer was to pull her into his arms and kiss. Her with all the pent-up longing of a man who'd thought he'd lost his chance at happiness. She melted against him, her hands fisting in his shirt as she kissed him back with equal fervor. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard and grinning like fools. I take it that's a yes? She asked. That's a hell yes, he replied, then grew serious. But I need you to understand something, Violetta. What we're talking about isn't going to be easy. Starting over, building something from nothing, it takes work and patience and faith that tomorrow will be better than today. I've got plenty of work in me, she said, her smile radiant as sunrise, and patience I can learn. As for faith, ... She stood on her toes to kiss him again, quick and sweet. I have faith in us. 3 months later, Sheriff Marcus Ironwood of Capital City received a wedding invitation written on store-bought stationery in careful feminine script. The ceremony would be held in the First Presbyterian Church of New Haven, Oregon Territory, and the bride and groom requested his presence if business allowed, at the bottom. In different handwriting, someone had added, "Thanks for the information. It made all the difference. C and V Vale." Ironwood smiled and pinned the invitation to his office wall, next to his collection of wanted posters and commendations. In his experience, happy endings were rare enough in the law business that they deserved to be celebrated. Outside his window, Capital City bustled with its usual mixture of legitimate business and barely concealed corruption. But Judge Aldrich Pemberton's carriage no longer made its regular rounds to the less savory districts. Some victories, Ironwood reflected, were worth more than others. And somewhere in Oregon Territory, a former sheriff and a woman who'd learned to trust again were building a life together under the same moon that had witnessed their first kiss silver, eternal and full of promise.